get ready, because on today's deep dive, we are going to be like totally twisting how you think about one of like the most famous civilizations ever. We're going to ancient Egypt.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
there's a twist. Imagine like if the pyramids just never existed.
Wow. That's quite a thought experiment, isn't it? To like just get rid of the thing that everyone knows about ancient Egypt and then see how different like our understanding of that entire civilization would be.
Yeah, exactly. So the excerpt that we're going to be looking at today comes from A World Without Pyramids, an alternate history of ancient Egypt.
Okay.
And it really does like make you wonder how differently we would think about ancient Egypt if we didn't have these like massive structures just dominating the entire landscape in our imaginations.
Yeah, it's almost like if you took a jigsaw puzzle
Okay.
and like took a piece out.
Yeah.
The picture's still there,
Right.
but you're missing this like really crucial element, so you have to like re-examine all the other pieces and how they fit together.
Okay, so let's start with the historians.
Okay.
How would they even like begin to understand ancient Egypt without the pyramids to like use as a reference point?
Well, the excerpt kind of suggests that historians would have to change their focus a lot.
Okay.
So instead of just seeing the pyramids as like, oh, you know, this shows how ambitious the pharaohs were and how much power they had, historians would really have to like dig deep into other parts of ancient Egyptian culture.
Okay.
Like imagine if you're trying to learn about American history,
Okay.
but you can't think about like westward expansion or the Civil War.
Yeah.
You'd have to look at other events or like social movements, cultural trends to really understand everything.
Okay, so it's like a similar situation.
Yeah.
So like what kind of things would historians have to focus on?
Wow.
What other pieces of the puzzle are there?
The excerpt talks about a few things.
Okay.
So like the hieroglyphic texts, those would become like even more important because we'd have to understand all those symbols to really know about their beliefs and their rituals and just daily life.
Right.
It's like we would only be able to understand them through the things they wrote down without any physical remains to help.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But wouldn't we also be missing out on learning about their architecture and engineering?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's not like there's no architecture left at all.
Okay.
So the excerpt mentions other buildings like temples and tombs,
Okay.
especially the ones at places like Luxor and Abydos.
Right.
So those would become like way more important
Okay.
for understanding their design and building techniques.
So it's like they've always been there, but now they can finally be in the spotlight.
Exactly.
So what about archaeologists?
Yeah.
What would they be doing differently without the pyramids?
Well, without the pyramids, they'd have to look somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And the excerpt has this really cool example of what they might find. It talks about this fictional archaeologist. Her name's Dr. Layla Omar,
Okay.
and she's working in the area around Saqqara.
Wait, isn't that where the step pyramid is?
Yeah, in our world.
Right.
But remember, there are no pyramids in this reality.
Oh, right.
So instead of a pyramid, Dr. Omar finds this massive underground city.
Oh, hold on. An underground city.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's this huge, like, maze of a city.
Wow.
With carvings and ceremonial chambers.
Wow, they really knew how to build.
Yeah.
Even without pyramids.
Exactly. And like this discovery would completely change how archaeologists think about how ancient Egyptians planned their cities and like their whole society.
So it's like when we change our focus, it can lead to all these new discoveries.
Yeah, like who knows what else is out there if we just look beyond the obvious, right?
I totally agree. It's like, who says we found all the amazing things in ancient Egypt already?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about how historians and archaeologists would be affected. But the pyramids aren't just for them, are they?
No, not at all.
They're like a huge part of Egypt's identity.
Exactly.
So what happens to Egypt as a culture without them?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It'd be like if a country lost its most important landmark,
Right.
they'd have to completely rethink who they are.
Yeah.
So in this world without pyramids, Egypt would need to find new ways to celebrate its history and culture.
So what would take their place?
Well,
Could be other old buildings or something totally different.
The excerpt has some interesting ideas.
Okay.
So like obelisks,
Okay.
those are already pretty important,
Yeah.
but they could become like the main thing.
Okay.
They're elegant. They're usually near temples and palaces.
Right.
They could represent like a different kind of beauty and power.
Okay.
Like imagine going on a school trip to Luxor, but instead of looking at the pyramids, you're standing in front of this massive obelisk at Karnak.
Yeah.
All covered in hieroglyphs, telling stories about pharaohs and gods. It's a different kind of experience, but just as powerful.
I see your point. It's
Yeah.
like all these different parts of Egyptian culture would get a chance to be noticed, but wouldn't people still feel like something was missing?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, those pyramids have been there for thousands of years,
Right.
but maybe not having them would make people appreciate other things even more.
Like what?
Well, the Nile River, for example,
Oh, yeah.
that's like the heart of Egypt.
Yeah.
It could become even more important for their identity.
Okay.
Imagine
Yeah.
festivals every year to celebrate the Nile flooding,
Yeah.
which is what made their farms grow and basically kept them alive.
Right.
That would be like connecting to their ancient traditions
Right.
and feeling proud of their history.
That's a really cool image.
Yeah.
The Nile is like this constant force in Egypt's history.
Yeah,
And now it's a symbol of how they can change and adapt.
exactly.
Wow, that's already blown my mind.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think about how not having the pyramids could completely change how we think about an entire civilization.
I know, right? And we're just getting started.
Oh,
We
really?
haven't even talked about how this would affect tourism or like all the new discoveries we could make.
Oh,
There's so much more to explore. So we were talking about how without the pyramids, historians and archaeologists would have to like rethink how they understand ancient Egypt.
right, but it's not just academics who would be affected, right?
Oh, no, definitely not.
What about, like, all the tourists?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, Egypt's like a huge tourist destination.
Oh,
And the pyramids are like the main thing people think of.
exactly.
So what would happen to all that if there were no pyramids?
Well, tourism would definitely look a lot different without the pyramids, like attracting everyone to Giza.
Yeah.
Tourists would probably spread out more
Okay.
and maybe find some cool places that they wouldn't have seen before.
So instead of just having one place where everyone goes, there would be lots of different sites to visit.
Exactly. Each one showing a different side of ancient Egypt.
Okay.
So, like, imagine exploring the Karnak temple complex,
Wait.
those giant columns and all the detailed carvings.
Yeah.
It would be like traveling back in time to when the pharaohs were in charge.
I can picture it.
Or think about wandering through the Valley of the Kings,
Okay.
where all those tombs are hidden under the sand
All right.
with all their treasures and secrets.
Yeah, those are already pretty amazing places.
Yeah, but in this world, without pyramids, they would be even more important.
It's like without the pyramids being the main attraction,
Yeah.
tourists would really have to like explore more deeply and find those hidden gems
Exactly.
and like experience all those different layers of this ancient civilization.
And you know what else?
What?
This change in tourism could actually be good for local communities.
How so?
Well, instead of everyone just going to a few big places,
Yeah.
the money from tourism would spread out to different areas.
Right.
So, like, small towns along the Nile would get more visitors,
Okay.
and they could share their unique cultures and traditions.
So everyone benefits.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Okay. That makes sense.
So, going back to what we were talking about before,
Yep.
about, like, losing all that information that the pyramids give us,
Right.
does the excerpt say anything about how we could fill in those gaps without them?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, it says that historians and archaeologists would have to rely even more on other sources of information.
Okay.
So, like, hieroglyphs would be super important.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just looking at the writing on the pyramids,
Right.
they'd have to study texts on temple walls and papyrus scrolls and even, like, paintings in tombs.
Wow, that's a lot of detective work.
Yeah, like piecing together clues from all over the place.
So it's not just finding new information.
Right.
It's also about interpreting what we already know in a new way.
Exactly. And that could lead to, like, completely new discoveries.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, the excerpt mentions sites like Abydos and Heliopolis.
Okay.
Those places are really important for Egyptian mythology and their ideas about the universe.
Right.
Imagine if we found, like, detailed star charts or astronomical records there.
Oh,
That would tell us so much about how they saw the sky and their place in it.
that's incredible.
Yeah, it's like not having the pyramids would make us look in other directions.
And find new things.
And maybe even come up with more interesting ways of understanding ancient Egypt.
So it's not all bad.
No, not at all.
So let's talk about what it would be like to actually live in Egypt without pyramids.
Okay.
I mean, they've always been there.
Yeah, it's easy to think of them as like a natural part of the landscape.
Yeah, like a mountain or something.
But not having them would totally change how Egyptians see their own history.
Like imagine living in a city your whole life,
Yeah.
and then suddenly its most famous landmark disappears.
It would definitely change how you feel about that place.
Yeah, for sure.
So think about it. School kids wouldn't go on field trips to the pyramids anymore.
Right.
Instead, they might go to places like Beni Hassan,
Okay.
where there are tombs with paintings showing everyday life in ancient Egypt.
Wow.
Like people harvesting crops or hunting or making pottery.
It would be like stepping right into the past.
Exactly. You'd be seeing ancient Egypt through the eyes of the people who actually lived there.
That's much more personal than just looking at a giant pyramid.
And the stories people tell would be different too.
How so?
Well, the Nile River is already super important for them.
Right. It's their lifeline.
But without pyramids, it might become even more central to their stories and myths.
Instead of stories about pharaohs building pyramids,
Yeah.
there would be stories about the gods and goddesses of the Nile.
Exactly, the ones who controlled the floods and made the land fertile.
It's amazing how not having one thing could change so much about how a culture sees itself.
Yeah, it really shows that history isn't just facts and dates.
Right.
It's a living thing made up of stories and traditions.
And without the pyramids, that whole story would be different.
I agree, and that brings us back to why this thought experiment is so cool.
Yeah.
It makes us question everything we think we know.
And look at things from a new angle.
And realize that history, culture, and human experience are all connected.
Wow. This has been an amazing journey so far.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm seeing ancient Egypt in a whole new light.
I know, right?
Not just as the people who built the pyramids, but as this like super creative and innovative culture with a spirit that's lasted for thousands of years.
Absolutely, and it makes you wonder what other what-if questions we could ask about the past.
And about ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to go back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
About how not having the pyramids might actually give us a more balanced view of Egyptian history.
Yes, that's an important point.
Yeah, coming more.
Well, think about it. With the pyramids gone,
Yeah.
other parts of ancient Egypt could finally get the attention they deserve.
Okay, like what?
Well, for starters, there's Nubia.
Okay.
That's a region in southern Egypt and northern Sudan.
Right.
They had their own unique culture and history.
But we don't hear much about them.
Yeah, they often get overshadowed by the pyramids and the pharaohs.
But without the pyramids,
Yeah.
Nubia could finally be in the spotlight.
Exactly. Like imagine those incredible temples at Abu Simbel.
Okay, the ones carved into the cliffs.
Yeah, those would become like the symbols of ancient Nubian civilization.
So it's like different parts of the story are getting a chance to be heard.
Exactly. And it's not just about geography.
Okay.
Without the pyramids, we might appreciate the art and culture of ancient Egypt even more.
So instead of just focusing on the big buildings,
Yeah.
we would look at the smaller, more intricate things.
Right, like their jewelry, their pottery, their paintings.
Things that we might overlook because we're so focused on the pyramids.
Exactly. Those objects would finally get a chance to shine.
And show us how talented the ancient Egyptians were.
Absolutely. And this thought experiment is really making us rethink our priorities as scholars and just as people who are fascinated by ancient cultures.
Yeah, it's not just about the biggest and most impressive things.
Right. It's about appreciating the details and the things that tell us about the people who made them.
Exactly, and this could also apply to their scientific and technological achievements.
Oh, yeah, like they were really good at medicine and astronomy.
Exactly, they had these medical papyri
Okay.
with all sorts of information about diseases and treatments and even surgery.
Wow.
And their calendar was super accurate, even by today's standards.
So instead of just talking about the pyramids as their biggest achievement,
Yeah.
we would also celebrate all these other things they did.
It's like we'd finally see the whole picture.
Wow. It's amazing how taking away one thing
Yeah.
can open up so many new possibilities.
Exactly. It reminds us that even the most well-known civilizations still have secrets to uncover.
I'm really starting to see ancient Egypt in a new way.
Me too.
It's not just about the pyramids. It's so much more complex and interesting than that.
That's the power of these thought experiments.
Yeah.
They make us question everything
And expand our horizons.
and appreciate how complex history really is.
Speaking of complexity,
Yeah.
we haven't really talked about the pyramids as burial places
Oh, right.
and what they tell us about how the ancient Egyptians thought about death and the afterlife.
That's a really important part of the story.
Yeah, how would we understand their beliefs without the pyramids?
Well, the pyramids are like these giant symbols of their beliefs about death and the journey of the soul.
Right, with all the burial chambers and ritual.
Exactly. So without them, we'd have to rely on other things, like the Book of the Dead.
Okay,
That's a collection of spells and prayers
Okay.
that were supposed to help people in the afterlife.
but would that be enough?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Book of the Dead is just words,
Right.
but the pyramids are like physical expressions of their beliefs. They show us the rituals, the symbols, the objects they used for burial.
So it's like trying to understand a religion just by reading its holy book
Yeah.
without ever seeing any of its ceremonies or going to its temples.
Exactly.
So we would definitely be missing something.
Yeah, but maybe those gaps in our knowledge would make us ask new questions.
Okay.
Like without the pyramids dominating everything,
Yeah.
maybe we'd pay more attention to the tombs of regular people.
Instead of just the pharaohs.
Exactly. We could learn about what ordinary Egyptians believed about death and the afterlife.
Because we'd get a more democratic view of death in ancient Egypt.
I like that. Yeah, it's not just about the elite anymore.
Wow. This deep dive has been incredible.
Hasn't it?
We've explored so much.
Yeah.
How not having pyramids would change everything for historians, archaeologists, tourists.
Yeah, even the Egyptians themselves.
But I feel like there's still more to discover.
You're right. There's one more layer to this thought experiment.
Okay.
It's about the symbolic meaning of the pyramids and what their absence would tell us about our own values. You know, it's kind of interesting to think about what the pyramids represent. They're kind of a symbol of, how humans always want to do something amazing.
Right. They're like these massive things that show how smart and ambitious people were.
Yeah, like we wanted to leave our mark on the world.
Exactly.
So if they never existed, it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
what would we celebrate instead? What would we want to leave behind?
It's like we're asking ourselves, what stories do we want to tell about humanity? Do we care more about big, impressive things?
Yeah.
Or do we value the smaller, more subtle things about a civilization?
Exactly. And that's what this thought experiment makes us think about.
It's like, what do we think is important? Is progress just about building bigger and bigger things?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it about, creating complex societies or understanding the universe or having strong beliefs?
Yeah, maybe it's about all of those things.
Like recognizing that humans can achieve amazing things in all sorts of ways.
Right, and that brings us back to that underground city that Dr. Omar found.
Oh, yeah, the one hidden under the sand.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like it's the opposite of the pyramids, right?
In a way, yeah, it shows that even without those giant structures, ancient Egypt was still capable of incredible things.
Like engineering, city planning, art.
Yeah, imagine going down into this underground city
Okay.
with all these paintings on the walls,
Yeah.
showing scenes from their daily lives, their rituals, maybe even their knowledge of the stars.
Wow, that would be amazing.
It would be like discovering a whole secret world,
Yeah.
showing how creative and smart they were, even without the pyramids.
So it's not just about the big, obvious things.
You know?
It's about all the ideas and innovations and stories that get passed down.
Exactly. And without the pyramids, those stories might be told in different ways.
Like through their writing,
Yeah.
or their art and crafts,
Yeah.
or even their festivals and traditions.
Exactly. The physical pyramids might be gone.
But the spirit of ancient Egypt would still be there.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's a great way to put it.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into a world without pyramids.
This has been an incredible journey.
It has.
I feel like I have a completely new understanding of ancient Egypt.
Me too.
They weren't just great builders.
Right.
They were so much more than that.
They were innovative, artistic, and their spirit has lasted for thousands of years.
It really makes you think about all the other what-if questions we could ask about history.
And about ourselves.
Exactly. And for all of you listening out there,
Yeah.
here's a final thought to ponder. What if another one of the world's most famous landmarks suddenly disappeared? How would that change how we understand history and culture? What hidden treasures might we find?
It's been great exploring these ideas with you.
Likewise, and until next time, happy exploring everyone.